Germany spent more than 30 years building up sales and profits in its car industry in China. Now it's just had the door slammed very firmly in its face. At one time, China accounted for 50% of VW's sales and profits and over 33% of BMW and Mercedes. But today that has shrunk dramatically and continues to shrink by the day. Now its largest single export country, behind China, the United States, with about 17% of total German exports, how the mighty have fallen, is terrified even that is at risk. With the latest threat of tariffs from Trump, those exports could soon go the same way, leaving a collection of smaller export markets and its own domestic market, Europe. But Europe is now coming under the control of the Chinese, the very ones who've stopped buying their premium cars. So in a double whammy, the German auto industry lose their premium exports and their budget domestic sales. Add in that Germany itself as a country is suffering very badly economically and is soon to hold a general election. Now, in difficult times, general elections often throw up strange results. But there is a famous saying in economic circles, put 5 economists in a room, you get 6 different answers. There is no simple single answer or reason. Economics is a complicated subject. But in simple economics 101, the German auto industry used to sell lots of VWs and Audis and BMWs and Mercedes and Porsches and Rolls-Royces and lots of other brands to China and America. It now sells very many fewer to China and might also soon sell very many fewer to the USA. So the idea that it can carry on making the same number of cars in 2025 as it did in 2024, 2023, 2022, 2020 and 2018, etc., just plain silly. It cannot. Fact number 1, it must make fewer cars and therefore it will need fewer factories. Ford and GM and Mercedes have all just announced that they are to reduce the number of cars that they will be producing in 2025. So a certain amount of reality is already starting to set in. Or is it? Well, you can answer this one for yourself. I just look back to when the first smartphone came out. I had a sort of one before the iPhone launched. Can't remember the make. It had a stylus, I remember, and a sat-nav, touch, basic internet, half-decent camera. It took video. It was quite bulky, but once the proper smartphones came out, I got one every 2 years. It was always on contract, because every 2 years, the latest model was just so much better. Better processor, better memory, better battery life, better camera, better screen, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, better everything. There was a real reason to upgrade. Global sales nearly 20 years ago were exponential. But then they reached a point where I stopped. 2016 was the actual peak. Now, I stopped when my old phone was still doing what I wanted it to do when the contract ended. So I just hung on to it, didn't upgrade. My 3 sons started doing the same. As long as the old one was working and doing all I used it for, I kept it. Then one day the battery life would get really silly or the apps I used no longer worked, so at that point I upgraded. But that was sometimes 2, 3, maybe 4, sometimes 5 years, not 2 anymore. And that happened with cars. At one time people just changed every 2 years religiously. Then that became 3. And then we just hung on to our cars for longer because, well, they just worked. And in some cases those cars came with a 7-year warranty. But the motor industry just carried on expecting us to change every 2 years. And in fact, we now started changing every maybe 3, 4 or even 5 years. We bought fewer cars. Even company cars were replaced less frequently. Then COVID happened, and when that ended, the buyers had also changed. Many people took early retirement. I did. Many who'd worked at home continued to work from home, no longer needed a second car to commute. Many changed jobs or set up cottage industries and worked permanently from home. But once again, the legacy auto industry forecast a huge pent-up demand and began churning out new cars like they were going out of fashion. Stock levels began to rise as those cars remained unsold in the dealers. Then the credit crunch hit and inflation hit and affordability became real issues. Still, the industry churned out the new cars into dealers that, well, by now they were absolutely overflowing with unsold cars. So manufacturers, realizing they were actually selling fewer cars, decided to raise the specs and make just top-of-the-range models, so that those they did sell made up in the profits for the reduced number of sales. And things continued to get worse. And all of this, by the way, without a single mention of EVs. This was already happening without the arrival of EVs. This was already inevitable. EVs just made it worse and happened quicker. The one standout issue here is that the auto industry, throughout all these changes, these challenges, has just carried on blindly, doing the same old, same old. We always did it this way, so we always will. It always worked in the past, so it always will in the future. But this time it hasn't, and they've suddenly found themselves in uncharted territory. They don't know what to do. Well, at least they might know what to do, but they are unable to do it. Logically, if the dealers are full of unsold stock, they should stop production. Just close the factories to allow the sales to clear out some of that stock. But of course, closing the factories, even a single factory for a single day, would send the stock price plummeting. So that can't even be considered. Plausible excuses are needed that the gullible shareholders will swallow. Supply chain issues. Yeah, we had to shut down the factories, not because there aren't enough buyers for the cars that we're making, but because we can't get the parts. Our suppliers have shut down and we're desperately searching for replacement suppliers. It's going to take a little while. Oh, no, shipping, that's our problem. Our parts are stuck in the Suez Canal, trapped by terrorists. We would build more cars, but the ships now have to divert round South America or South Africa. That adds weeks to the journey, so it's stopping us from making more cars. Then, blessing from heaven, the unions, they demanded wages we could not afford to pay, so we've had to refuse. And it is they that have closed our factories, not us. We're raring to go. We want to make more. We want to get lots more new cars out. But you have to blame the unions. They've shut the factories with their strikes. But finally, it seems they've run out of excuses. They're finally getting closer to the truth. They're not there yet, but they're getting closer. General Motors has just announced that, no, we're not stopping production, but we are going to delay the launch of the upgraded, refreshed models we planned and promised to launch this year because, well, our buyers are still perfectly happy buying the 4 or 5-year-old models we have on offer. We got plenty of buyers, so we're going to continue making the really old model. Ford has done something very similar on the F-150 refresh. Not the F-150 Lightning, the EV model, but the petrol and diesel ones. Ford is not going to launch the refresh models this year as promised. If you want an F-150 at the moment, it's going to have to be one of the old models, probably a 24 or even a 23 one. Mercedes, meanwhile, they're much more open. We've got to cut costs by at least 10%, so no new models. You have to buy one of the old ones. And by the way, they're going to be going up in price as well. We've got to make more profit. I suggested tongue-in-cheek in a recent video that if Trump does introduce the tariffs that will harm Ford and General Motors and Stellantis ICE manufacturing in the States, that one strategy might be to shut down totally for the duration of his presidency. Oh, notice, did not say for the next 4 years, because if the entire US motor industry shuts down, it's highly unlikely he's going to last 4 years. Or as a bonus, that might also be the best way to get Musk out of politics and back into running his companies. Double whammy. Well, Jim Farley recently stated that Trump's tariffs could seriously damage the entire auto industry in the United States. Does Trump know what he's doing? Does he care? Well, it's all reaching a crescendo, a perfect storm for the motor industry, where all these factors are coalescing. And the various industries and governments and countries might find themselves with nowhere to go. There's no easy answer. In fact, in some cases, there is no answer at all. For some, the future is decidedly bleak. For some, they have already passed that tipping point of let's just go back to the way we were. And for others, they've already passed the tipping point of being able to go to where they were going to go to. Some answers will come out of the meetings this coming week when the UK and EU Prime Ministers will meet with Trump, but are most likely to solve nothing at all, just raise new issues. Next week, the motor industry is still likely to be in very serious crisis. Well, both Trump and von der Leyen will be finding out that they have the hardest jobs in the world and that they are both supposedly in charge of unions. The Union of the United States and the European Union, yet in tough times they turn out to be anything but united. Both could find themselves on a one-way street. In that sense, Britain and Canada might be sitting pretty and might want to get a meeting arranged rather quickly to become BFF. Both of them are somewhat independent, in control of their own destinies, able to make quick and binding decisions that might see them at least come out of this in one piece. Oh, and I said I didn't do politics. I'm Dave. Thanks very much for watching.